Hey, everybody. My name is Ryan McAniff. I'm the owner of Minute Women Dementia Care Specialists. We're located in Lexington, Massachusetts. And today I wanted to talk to you about minimum hours and the pros and the cons of that, and give you the perspective from an agency owner on minimum hours and why our hours are the way they are and why other agencies may be the way they do business, and so that you can be educated when you make calls to private home care companies. And so, one of our core values is education. And every single week, I have this conversation with families, or Debbie does, where a family calls up and then they say, hey, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. And it's a low amount of hours. And we explain to them how this industry works. And then they thank us and say, we might not be able to use your services, but I wanted to thank you for explaining this to us, because we've called 5 other agencies. They basically just said, we can't do that, and hung up the phone and don't take the time to explain kind of how this industry works. And if I had known this 3 hours ago, I wouldn't have called, 7 different agencies trying to talk to people about what I need and what we are looking for. And so it doesn't mean that you can't find what you're looking for. It just means if you're looking for low hours, you're going to have to look a little bit harder, or you're going to have to manage your expectations, and you're not going to, have your cake and eat it too on everything. And so let's get into it, talk about this, and let's talk about minimum hours. So, minimum hour overview, it is going to be broken up into 2 segments, right? So, when you talk about minimum hours, you're talking about your hours for the week, and you're talking about your hours blocks of time per day. So what can happen, and has happened to us certainly, is that people will say, hey, listen, I'm looking for 6 hours a week, 6 hours a day of care, 30 hours a week, Monday through Friday. Great. We can talk about that. We can certainly see if we can make that work and find the right caregivers, but that is an amount of hours that we can help with. And then they kind of drop a little bomb and say, well, I'm looking for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening to help get mom or dad ready for the day, and then, put them down for the day. And I'd really like that to be the same caregiver. And that's where we kind of hit the brakes and say, well, that's something that we're probably not going to be able to do. Because at the end of the day, from a home care perspective, what we look at is what the scheduling needs to be for blocks of hours. And if it's and a 6 hour block of time is going to be far easier to schedule than 2 3 hour blocks. It might as well be 2 different customers calling up and saying, hey, I need 9 hours, I need 15 hours a week, and one customer needs it in the morning, one customer needs it in the afternoon. So even though in total it makes logical sense, and I'm not trying to be cruel to anybody whatsoever. It makes logical sense. Hey, I'm looking for these amount of hours. At the end of the day, it's still just as difficult, if not more difficult, to do that. And so when we talk to family members and we say, well, what are you looking for? And they say, what are your minimum amount of hours? For Minute Women, it's 30 hours a week, and ideally it's 40 hours a week. Now, we have higher minimums, and the reason we have higher minimums isn't just because we want to make more money, which certainly, we're here in business to make money, but there's a reason for it. And the reason is because we provide specialized dementia care. And when you're working with somebody who's living with dementia, consistency is imperative. And one of the benefits of having more hours is you're going to be getting more consistent schedules from caregivers. So I'm kind of, giving you the information a little beforehand, but that's one of the benefits of it, which is why we require a higher set of hours. Some agencies, it's 12 hours a week. Some other agencies, it's 20 hours a week. But when I go into my masterminds, I'm just being frank with you. I'm telling you, most people are trying to avoid, 15 hours and less a week as much as possible, because of the reasons I'll explain to you. And hopefully that makes you understand. But at the end of the day, it makes sense to start small. It logically makes sense to, let's start small. Let's ease into this because of budget reasons, because dad's opposed to this, because we don't need this amount of care. But small is relative. And when you say what's small to a family member and what's small to an agency are 2 totally different things. So to give you an example, if somebody's, and I'm just pulling up my calculator right here on my computer, if somebody's getting 15 hours a week and there's 160 hours in total in a week, that is 15 hours is just under 9% of the week. So 9% of the week, somebody's looking for services, and 90% of the time they're not looking for services. And so when you put in 30 hours for a week over 168 hours, you're at 18%. 18% of the hours are needed for services, and the other portion of it, 82%, are not needed. And so that puts it a little bit in perspective of what small is small. It's still not a majority of the hours. And then when you bring that up to caregivers who are looking for as many hours as they can work, that isn't enticing them as much as it once did. 10 years ago, you could get caregivers to work 3 or 4 hour blocks of time. It's much harder to do that now because caregivers are coming further away. And on top of that, there is increased competition in the labor market to find these caregivers, retain these caregivers, and keep them employed. So small is relative depending on who you talk to. And I don't mean to sound mean about this. 15 hours a week at 40 hours, 15 hours a week at $40 an hour is $600 a week. You multiply that by a month, $2,400. For a lot of people, $2,400 is more than they're paying on their mortgage in this country, right? Maybe not people who have bought their mortgages and bought their houses in the last 2 or 3 years, but $2,400 is a lot of money. And then obviously over the course of a year, that's just under $30,000. That's not inexpensive, and I'm not ignorant to that fact that it is expensive, but again, this is just being honest on how this industry works. And so when you're looking at a minimum of 40 hours a week times $40 an hour, that's $1,600 a week. That ends up being $6,400 a month, and that's just under $77,000 per year. That's, for many people, that's more than what they make in a whole year. So it is not lost on me how expensive this service is, and it's just more to explain to you kind of the challenges that can come for this, so that you can educate yourself when you go out into the market to look for these things and understand, hey, listen, this might be a challenge, what we're looking for with minimum hours. So again, small is relative. It all depends on the perspective. Is it small from the client's side, or is it small from the agency side? And so, I don't know why these slides don't go in the order I want, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So what is considered short hours? Well, again, I kind of went through this. I would consider, as I said before, in the masterminds that I'm part of, I would consider anything under 20 hours or less a week to be considered short hours. It's going to be hard to find consistent care for someone that's looking for just 20 hours a week. And again, I know I just said just, but that's just the world we're living in private home care. And that has changed over time. Years ago, you could get 20 hours a week pretty consistently, but nowadays it is extraordinarily competitive. And so that donut hole and that gap of care continues to get hollowed out. So if you think about, a donut hole, and basically this is just a euphemism for kind of the class, I don't know the phrase, but class warfare that we have going on, or the the folks that have a lot of money and the folks that don't have a lot of money. You understand what I'm trying to say. And so at the top of that donut, there's all the people that have the money to be able to pay for home care. At the bottom of that donut is the folks that are low income, that qualify for Medicaid or Mass Health. And the problem is that donut hole is getting bigger and bigger and bigger every single year, of people that have made a decent amount of money in their lives but do not have the cash to be able to pay for private home care services for a long period of time, basically indefinitely, to keep mom or dad at home. And that is a growing problem. And that's one of the things that we're not oblivious to. We know that it's getting harder and harder for families to pay for this, and you end up pricing yourself out of the market. And that's a real problem that's going on in this industry today, that more and more folks are priced out of the market and they can't afford the care that they want to give their mom or their dad. And so, going back to this, I wanted to talk about the difficulties of short hours. And so, again, trying to be transparent to folks. I want to say the things that maybe other agencies would not be willing to say, but first and foremost, we're running a business here, and we have to keep the business open to be able to employ everybody that works in the office, to employ all of the caregivers that we have, and then to keep everybody that we're caring for safe at home. And so when you look at the business side of the ROI, most agency owners understand that there are two major costs to this part of this the company is the marketing side and the recruitment side. And certainly there are other departments that cost money, but it costs a certain amount of money to attain clients. And then it costs a certain amount of money to attract and retain and hire caregivers. And most agencies understand that there is a specific return on investment for doing that. And if you have a client that's getting 24 hours of care 7 days a week, the return on that investment is going to be very short, right? You're going to start profiting very quickly for those higher hour cases versus somebody that's looking for 12 hours a week of care. It's going to take much, much longer to get a return on that investment for the marketing side and for the recruitment and retainment side. And then that kind of business ROI kind of bleeds down into some of the other issues. And that's why I left it number one is caregiver interest. The way this industry works is that if you think in the middle, there's a pool of caregivers, and on the edge of the pool are all these different agencies. Those agencies are calling those caregivers and paying those caregivers multiple times a day with different opportunities they may have. While the caregivers are W-2 employees of Minute Women, there are also W-2 employees of other agencies in the area. And we're competing against one another for the business, the referrals that we get from the healthcare industry for people needing care or finding us on Google or wherever our customers find us. And so if a caregiver accepts a 12-hour week case, they're considered per diem, right, as needed. And then when that case goes away or the person dies or they no longer need services, that caregiver is now back into trying to find work through the agencies that they're employed with. And so let's say somebody needs to be working 40 hours a week to pay their bills, send money home back to Africa, and to keep their head above water. They may take a 12-hour a week case to, have a stopgap. But the second they're getting calls from folks saying, hey, listen, I have a 45, Minute Women called, we think you have the ability, the availability and the personality that would be a great match for this case, and we can give you 45 hours a week. What do you think that caregiver is going to do? That caregiver is going to resign from the low hour case job, and they're going to then pick up the higher hour case job that's likely also going to provide more consistency of care for a longer period of time in terms of, having one place to go to work. They're going to be there for 8 hours or whatever it might be, 9 hours a day, and the client's looking for this ongoing, right? Versus when you're looking for 12 hours a week, that caregiver is likely going to other clients as well. So they're doing they're 3 hours in the morning, then they're trying to find something that fits for another 4 or 5 hours or 8 hours. And if they can't find another 8-hour case, they're going to a third client and so to fill it out so that they have, an 8 to 10 hour day. And so what ends up happening is going to the next part of this slide, which is consistency and the family expectations. The number one referral source for families is number one referral source for home care companies is past clients. And so if you all of a sudden start sending a caregiver to a client, and every week that caregiver leaves the job and a new caregiver comes in, and the next week a caregiver comes in, and you have basically a revolving door of caregivers, what is that going to do with the relationship with the family? It's probably going to erode and deteriorate over time, because I have yet to meet a family that doesn't want consistency of a caregiver. Now, that isn't to say that you'll never find a caregiver that's looking for 12 hours a week. That's never to say that you won't find the needle in the haystack, but it is a bit of a needle in a haystack. You're going to need to find a caregiver that lives very close by so the commute isn't far for them, and it's got to match their hours perfectly for what they're looking for. And they're out there, but they're not just sitting on a shelf ready to go at any moment's time, because they are getting calls from other agencies saying, hey, we have this available. We have a live-in available. Would you be interested in doing a live-in? And then all of a sudden they're making, a lot more money with consistent ongoing care. And so that is also the problem that comes with this, is that the concern on the home care agency side that we're trying to kind of patchwork this low hour case together, because even though it's extraordinarily hard. But we know that you're going to have last minute call outs. You may have no call, no shows because caregivers feel bad about ending services with that client. So instead of calling up the agency, sometimes they just never call up and they just don't show up to the case. And then you have that problem that really kind of is a big problem, because now the family was expecting somebody to show up and they just didn't. So what is the agency going to do about that? And then all of a sudden, those low hour cases end up becoming the taking up the most amount of time in the office, because you're constantly begging, borrowing, and stealing caregivers to go out to that. And then it ends up becoming just a situation where you're throwing a body in there. You're just throwing somebody in there that's willing to accept the shift, even if it's just for the day. And then the relationship with the family starts to deteriorate and really becomes a major problem. And then the family members are saying, hey, listen, never use Minute Women or this home care agency again, because they could never send a consistent caregiver and it was terrible and we would never use them again for those reasons. So then when you put all that together between the business ROI, the caregiver interest and turnover, and then the family's expectations and the consistency is poor, that is why so many agencies now are saying, hey, listen, it's not worth taking a 4 hour a day, 2 or 3 day a week case, because it's just so difficult to staff. It's going to take the office it's going to be labor intensive for the office to staff it. And then on top of that, your the family is expecting the same caregiver, and it's not going to be a realistic situation where you're going to find success. So typically when families call us up looking for 12 hours a week or 15 hours a week or 20 hours a week, we explain this to them and we say to them, like, listen, if you can get by with having a different caregiver showing up every single shift, that may work out for you. It's still not what we do, but that's what you're looking at. You're looking at, it's going to be a changing face all the time. And you're going to have inconsistencies in care. There may be situations where the agency calls up and says, nobody's showing up today because we couldn't, the main caregiver called out and we can't find a caregiver to take the case. So you're basically going to have to do it yourself, which is something we never want to do, right? That's something that we absolutely don't want to do. We had a situation just this weekend. You can probably see behind me, there's a bunch of snow. Massachusetts got hit with 8 inches of snow, and a caregiver was going to a case, a 16-hour-a-day case, and she got in an accident. And thank God she's safe. It was just some damage to her vehicle, and she had to get her vehicle towed. But Debbie and I went out there and provided the care. Debbie went out and provided the care while I helped out the scheduler with trying to find some type of replacement for her. We ended up finding a replacement for that caregiver out in Worcester. We paid out of pocket for the Uber drive from Worcester to Boston, which is not a short drive. That's probably 45 minutes. The Uber ride back to Boston just to make sure that case was staffed. And because that client is 16 hours a week 16 hours a day ongoing, that is something that we're willing to eat the cost on. We didn't pass those charges along to the client. If you watched our video on what we do in snow emergencies, I said exactly that if it's in our control, we will never charge overtime. We won't charge the Uber drivers. We won't charge any of those costs to the family. And that was in our control, in the sense of the caregiver got into an accident that was not the family's fault, right? Now, if I explained it in that video, I'm not going to go into it. Watch that one. But that was a perfect example of, because we were doing such a large amount of hours, it made sense to send that Uber driver out to pay for the Uber back and forth. We probably didn't make money on that shift, but in the long run, I can see the forest through the trees and know, hey, listen, we kept the client safe, the family's happy, and we're going to have an ongoing client for the next few months at the very least. Because we did that. If we had just called up that client and said, hey, listen, nobody's showing up, it's on your own, that would have helped erode the relationship we have with that family and that client. Now, going back to the business ROI, right? If that was a 12-hour-a-week case and we paid out caregiver to go from Worcester to Boston in an Uber drive that probably cost $100 each way, so $200. How many shifts would it have taken to make up that Uber drive? It probably would have taken weeks to make that up. And all of a sudden, basically, you've lost a month or more of revenue. And I know that that's horrible to say. I know we're in healthcare, and I know that there's a chance people out there may say that's, Ryan's a horrible person because of it, but that's also the reality of the situation too, right? And I think a lot of people out there, when I explain this to them, they sit there and say, yeah, I mean, I don't like it, but he makes sense. He's right. He's not, he's not saying anything that doesn't make sense from a business perspective. So those are the reasons why the difficulties of short hour cases are so tough, because it's the return on investment with the business. When things go wrong, we're going to be there for clients. And, that is a situation where if it was 12-hour a week case, then we wouldn't have digging out of that Uber hole for weeks. Caregiver interest and consistency in family expectations. I understand why families have their expectations. They're paying a lot of money for it, but those are the main problems with short hour shifts. And I apologize if this sounds like a complaining. I'm not trying to complain. We just don't take those types of shifts anymore because we know the challenges for it, and we pass those referrals along to other agencies that are saying that they are happy to take those shifts. And I hope they're doing a good job with it. But we haven't found a level where we can do a good job for that. And I don't think it's because what we're doing wrong. It's because they're just so challenging. And so, what we find is some of the things that you're going to find, and I want to find that slide and to try to keep this this short or short as possible. It's probably going to be 20 minutes or so. But if you're a family member and you have a loved one that needs care and you're looking for 12 hours, 15 hours, or short hours of care, you're going to have to be flexible. It's a matter of, hey, listen, you're going to almost have to be willing to find a caregiver that's willing to match those hours. And if those hours ideally are, let's say it's 7 to 10, 3 days a week, you're going to have to be probably flexible on the start times and the end times. So maybe it's 6 to 9, maybe it's 8 to 11, and you may have to be flexible on what days of the week somebody shows up. You're going to have a bigger challenge on the weekends, especially in Massachusetts on Sundays. Saturdays are a little easier. I'd say they're more than a little easier. They're a good amount easier, but Sundays are really difficult. Saturdays a bit less difficult. And then obviously Monday through Friday is where you're going to have the most amount of luck. And then the expectation of consistency is likely not going to be there. You're going to have to understand that there's going to be changes with caregivers. There's going to be turnover on the case. And if that's something you can live with, that's great. If it's something that you can't live with, then that might be a non-starter for you, and you might have those challenges. But I would really recommend you to talk to the agency you're speaking to and interviewing about this, and be having a frank conversation about it. Like, if you absolutely need consistency of care, it's going to be very difficult to find that with 12 or 15, 20 hours a week or less, maybe even like 25 hours a week or less. It's just going to be tough. There are certainly the caregivers out there, but you may find yourself going through a few agencies until you find that right caregiver. And if you're willing to be flexible, and then you're willing to be okay with inconsistency, then you're going to increase your chances. And then the last one is cost. The cost is probably going to go up, and it's going to go up dramatically. I wouldn't be shocked as if, let's say, the average in Massachusetts is $40 an hour. It would not surprise me if somebody charged $150 for 2 hours of care. I'm not saying that's happening. I haven't talked to anybody about it, but you're going to have to so overpay for care that you almost might as well just get the 5 hours. Kind of is the point of it. Like, and it makes no sense. I get it, but it's just the way that it works. We've had challenges with caregivers accepting even 2-hour shifts as if they were 5 hours. Hey, listen, we'll pay you as if it's 5 hours, but it's only 2 hours. And for whatever reason, they don't want to do a 2-hour shift because of, I believe it's the travel involved. It's the wear and tear on their vehicle. It's the economically fragile caregivers don't always have the most reliable transportation. So they may be looking at from the lens of, yeah, I'm getting this 5 or 6 hour shift, but it's going to take me an hour to get there, an hour to get back, and my car is on the fritz. I'd rather find a case that's 6 hours, that's 15 minutes away from where I live, rather than an hour away from where I live. And I know that even if my car breaks down, I could just take a quick Uber, and it's only going to cost me 10 or 15 bucks. And so I know that where other agencies I've talked to where they do the short hour shifts of even like 1 hour, it's really focused on assisted living. So they find a caregiver or a caregiver team that's willing to go to assisted living. So they're only going to 1 or 2 or 3 assisted livings a day. And they do a bunch of hours there where they stack hours, where it's like 1 hour per client or 2 hours per client, and they can get 3 clients at this assisted living. They get another 3 clients at another one, another 3 hours at another one, and then it's a full 12 or 16 hour day. And they do charge quite a bit for that, and it's like double or triple the cost, which is why $120, $150 an hour isn't surprising to me, even though it's a lot of money. So those are the challenge with short hour cases. I don't know if I came across as complaining. I really hope I'm not. It's more or less trying to educate you on the challenges from our perspective of where these short hour cases. And if you've called up 10 or 15 agencies and they just hang up the phone, essentially, I mean, they don't hang up on you, but they say, sorry, we don't have anybody that can do that. Or no, we don't have any. Usually they say, we don't have any caregivers at this moment in time that could do those amount of hours. Thank you so much. And they hang up. Nobody knows. The families don't understand why have I called 7 agencies? Because in a family's mind, 12 times $40 an hour is $500 a week. Who wouldn't take $500 a week? It's not because the agencies don't want your $500 a week. It's because of the difficulty of staffing these short hours and the cost of managing a client and managing a case. I mean, think you've got the on-call, you've got a supervisor that goes out and checks up on your clients. Then all of a sudden you have your schedulers who are going to be working quite a bit because there's going to be call-outs and last-minute fill-ins, and you're going to be spending 2 hours to find one caregiver to go out and do a 2 or a 3 hour shift. Those business costs add up very quickly. And so that's kind of like why I make the video and why I explain it to folks, is just to let them know what the challenges are when it comes to these short hours, so that you can be prepared, so that you don't be surprised if you have to call 20 different agencies to find somebody that says, you know what, I have the right caregiver. And you may find that, and I really hope that you do. But I would say that more often than not, families are struggling to find that right caregiver. So hopefully this video gives you some insight. I hope that it was educational. I hope I came across and just trying to I want to help you and let you know what those challenges are and what's going to happen in these situations when families are looking for short hours. I'm sure there will be somebody in the comments at some point in time in the future that writes below, hey, what are you talking about? I called an agency and they did a great job. And if that's you, fantastic. But I've been doing this for 15 years. It hasn't gotten any easier in 15 years. If anything, it's gotten harder. You have a labor shortage. The caregivers know that they are in high demand. Caregivers are needed in hospitals. They're needed in nursing homes. They're needed in assisted livings. They're needed for VNAs and home health. They're needed for hospice companies. They're needed in private home care. And then you also have the underground market, the under the table market, where caregivers are getting offers from people on Facebook and different marketplaces where you can find caregivers. There's not enough caregivers to go around, and simple economics of supply and demand kick in, where they say, hey, listen, if there's low supply, there's high demand. And what does that mean? The caregivers can sit there and wait and say, hey, I'm going to get a call from one of the 7 agencies, 5 to 7 agencies I work for, and one of them is eventually going to call me in the next week with 40 or 50 hours a week of care that I can provide. And then I do 40 hours for one agency, I do another 40 hours for another agency, I've got 80 hours a week of care. Versus if you do 3 hours from 9 to 12, you've just taken up somebody's half a day where they could have been doing from 7 to 7. And that's what the situation ends up being, that the caregiver will say, no, I'll wait, give me a call when they say, give me a call when you have longer hours. I'm looking for long hours, 12 hour, 8 hour, 10, 12, 8 hours a shift is what they replied to when you call up and say, hey, I have a 3 or 4 hour shift available. So that's how it goes. I wish I had better news for you. I don't have a solution to the problem. I don't know how to fix all these things. I can only kind of report to you on the challenges that you may face when you're looking for those minimum hours. But if you find that right person and it's a great fit and they're giving you the exact hours that you're looking for, do everything you can to keep them, because the grass isn't always greener, and it's going to be usually very difficult to replace that person if you find somebody that's willing to do 20 or less hours a week. So with that being said, I hope you have a great one, and I will catch you on the next video.